Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Bayonetta 2 walkthrough. It's time for more extras and more tag climax. This is the penultimate part of all tag climax stuff, and basically its primary function is going to be to show off Boulder and one other optional character that we will be unlocking during the course of this video. Now, Boulder plays basically the same as you almost the same as when you fight him during the game. So he can summon the Laguna with Fortitudo and so on and so forth as his sort of pseudo-wicked weaves. He kind of slashes about, he can summon the fireballs and the lightning bolts. I don't quite know how to play as him properly. And to be perfectly honest, I think that's probably the case for most people. But yeah, it's really cool. And it's particularly awesome because you can choose between having him masked and not, which is a slight rarity for the three other optional characters apart from Bayonetta and Jeanne. Well, the character that we're going to be unlocking this part has an alternate costume kind of thing, but the other one that we will be seeing next part does not. Now, I think in general the way that you tend to be able to get the best combos with Boulder is stuff like manipulating when you use your kind of magic attacks, but as you will see when I actually do play as him, it's very odd, and I got kind of very confused with how his combos work. But I do really like that Boulder is a playable character here. It's just I know that there were, and I think still are, people who were just well, why can't we have Boulder playable during the main story? Which, is a reasonable request. But, the main reason that is the case, and it's a very simple thing, is that they have different skeletons to Bayonetta and Jeanne and the other optional character that we will be playing next part. Because they all function on the same skeleton with the same kind of moveset. And while you can have Boulder and Rodin and Loki fighting alongside you during the game, because they don't function in the same manner, it's very difficult to, I think, insert them into the story because of all the cutscenes. I know that somebody, I think, did suggest that a method of getting past that would be a kind of mode where you could just skip all the cutscenes, or DLC where you play as Boulder. I'm not quite sure I would like that, if only because, generally I'm not a fan of playing as Boulder. It's simple as that. I would much rather play Bayonetta, Jeanne, and the other character. I guess because it's combos that I'm more used to, therefore I'm much more willing to make use of them, but either way, it's all a little bit complicated, and yes, also, so I was doing a little bit of Halo farming the other day. Yeah, just do chapter 14 of Witch until 30 climax, and have Jeanne, Gaze of Despair equipped, and then also Bracelet at a time, and then just kind of obliterate. Because you will get 3 million Halos very quickly. It's very embarrassing that I've been constantly saying, Tag Climax is the only way to get a lot of Halos. Because it's not. In fact, Tag Climax is probably one of the most tedious methods of getting a lot of Halos, especially millions, because it will take you hours. But here we go, we're finally back to taking down Rodin. And I have to say, Rodin is ridiculously difficult. I mean, there's a reason for that, as you will see later on, but he's just a monster. Because he's ridiculously quick, ridiculously powerful, and just so combo happy, it's insane. Thankfully, sort of because I'm using weapons that I'm used to, this went a lot smoother than I was expecting it to. Because it could have gone incredibly badly, and then I would have had to play even more rounds of Tag Climax to get us all the way back round to being able to fight as... well, to being able to fight Rodin, let alone fight as him. And I have to say, I think he is by far more difficult than when we fought him in Bayonetta 1 as the super secret awesome final extra boss. Just because he is even more violent than he was then. And like, Rodin was kind of aggressive beyond all belief, but you were able to kind of cheese him. Whereas here, it's a lot more difficult to do. A lot more difficult to do. But for beating that verse, which is verse card 53, well, it's verse card 0, but it's the 53rd card of the lot. Basically, if you complete the round of Tag Climax after that, you unlock the ability to play as Rodin, which is really awesome. I'm not a fan of playing as Rodin, as you will see. It's a case of sort of, the computer knows how to play these characters far, far, far better than I ever could. Because they are very, very, very different in terms of their gameplay styles to kind of the primary mode. Which is great, because it means that they are highly unique, and kind of you actually get something different from playing as them, which I think is why people wanted to be able to play the main story as them. But they're very difficult to learn. And I think that's what terrifies me about them. And also why I've just kind of never settled in, because I've never spent enough time with them to be able to learn their intricacies. Nor do I particularly care about doing so, because I think I've covered enough. And definitely by the time I finish this walkthrough, I will have covered enough of Bayonetta 2 to last me a lifetime. And I do mean that quite seriously.
My turn now.
By the time I finish recording this walkthrough, I will have covered basically everything. It will be essentially 100% complete. Apart from maybe Witch Trial 5, but that's neither here nor there. So there we go. We have Rodin available for Tag Climax. And so our next 2 rounds of Tag Climax are going to be played using Boulder and Rodin. So we will open with Rodin in... You've got the choice of Japan style, which is what he wears in this game, and New York style, which is what he wore in the last game, and then we are going to be playing with Boulder. And then, come the next round, we will be swapping over and playing as Boulder, and having Rodin as our partner. And then the next part is another character becoming available. Which is just like, yay! So, the main thing with Rodin is that he's very slow, but very powerful. He also doesn't have a dodge, he just has kind of this blocky, shieldy thing, which can, I believe, put you into a sort of pseudo witch-timey thing, but I'm not really sure how it works. Either way, it's very difficult to get combos with Rodin. He's just very kind of overly slow, and so it's highly likely that whoever you're fighting alongside will win. Because, unless you know how to play Rodin, in which case you'll be fine. But I do not, and therefore I suck horrendously. I do mean that. Like, I am awful. Absolutely awful as Rodin. I mean, he plays exactly the same as when you fought alongside him on the Insidious at the end of chapter 10. But trying to kind of do that yourself is a very, very difficult thing. Especially if you're trying to win your type climax rounds, because it's hard. What is cool though is that when you do Umbran Climax, you go into this rather wonderful satanic demon form, which I'm sure anybody who has played more than a bit of Bayonetta 2 to the point where they know where that also comes from will have learnt to have an absolutely huge detestation of that form. Absolutely monstrous detestation of it. Why? Well, you'll see soon enough. Oh, it's driving me potty. Also, I would just like to kind of go into a witch time substitute for Rodin, please, because I don't think I've done it at all just yet. One of the cool things, though, is that sort of Rodin's taunts are quite cool. It's like he does, I think it's "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," which I'm pretty sure is the phrase that is above the door, well, above the gates of hell, the sculpture that Auguste Rodin made. So it's a nice little tie-in. Also, it's definitely what's above the gates of hell in the Divine Comedy. Also, are you getting sick of worship yet? Because, I mean, I know I am a little bit. It just kind of comes with playing the same verses so many times in quick succession. Because, like, I'm all for replaying stuff. I mean, the fact that I do commentaries of games on the internet kind of says that all, really. Because every single game that I have ever done a commentary on, bar 2, I think, they were all second, third run-throughs of games. The only 2 kind of essentially blind runs that I've ever done are Tomb Raider Legend and Tomb Raider Anniversary. And actually, no, I think with Tomb Raider Legend I actually played through it before I recorded it, but it was like immediately before, or something ridiculous like that. Might be wrong. You'd have to watch those walkthroughs to let me know what I say, because I cannot remember. But yeah, so like, I replay games all the time. It's a kind of regular occurrence. I don't replay stuff that regularly, I only tend to replay them if I'm recording. But I still do it, and I tend to leave quite a large gap between replayings, because otherwise you just kind of can begin to get bored of something that you absolutely adore. I mean, that has sort of happened with Bayonetta 2 for me right now, because a game that's story takes about 8 hours, 5 hours-ish, has kind of ballooned into something that has eaten up about 30-odd hours of my life so far. Technically 38 because of my first run-through, so it's sort of like, I mean, there's so much content here to play with and make use of, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. I just made the really silly decision of trying to record it all in one reasonably fell swoop. It was a terrible idea. Also, I do not know what was possessing me to try and go for some of those other verses. Like, I think I wanted a little bit of variety, and then it was just like, no, that would probably kill me. And then I'd have to redo the entire round, and can he be bothered? So we'll go for Reastisha, because I can actually do reasonably well at this verse, even if it is kind of a bit of a pain when you kind of increase the difficulty. I don't know, he's just really, really, really insanely difficult to read. Like, I mean, the cubes are kind of slightly obvious, but kind of being able to act in time is really odd. But yes, I should probably say, kind of, final thoughts on playing as Rodin. It's really cool that we finally get to play as him. I'm just not a fan of the style. And a really ridiculous thing that happens whenever you play the missions where you are in the Umbran armor. Whenever you go into Umbran Climax with Rodin in that, you can see his demon form kind of just floating, sitting beneath the mech. It's ridiculous. I think it's an issue of the model not fitting and there being a slight glitch. It's not something you really notice in gameplay because you're too busy focusing on everything else. But time to let my hair out. Yeah, it's just a funny little thing that I noticed and now can never unsee. But here we go, it's time to play as Boulder. And we've stuck Rodin in his Bayonetta 1 costume, although for some bizarre reason it makes his butt incredibly prominent. Now I believe that the way that Boulder's kind of control scheme is set up is that the punch button is the blade and the kick button is the magic. But yeah, also as you can see, Rodin is absolutely beasting it in terms of combo points, which is depressing because I am sucking so badly. This is your fate. Also, what's awesome is that Boulder's and Climax form is kind of where all the peacock feathers kind of fan out, which is really cool. I mean, I'd love to be able to kind of do all the fly stuff that he did, but evidently we're not allowed. Yeah, the problem that I have with playing as Balder is that I can't get the grasp between balancing the sword, well, the spear play and the magic, and placing it into epic combos. I mean, there are people who I think can do remarkably well with Balder, but I unfortunately am not one of those people. I do like that sort of a lot of Balder's kind of taunts involve the peacock feather kind of comb broom thing. It's a nice tie-in to what he does in the first game, which is just awesome, really. Because that whole kind of peacock look that Balder has, both here and in the first game, it's just a really kind of interesting choice. Because it's obviously a kind of... well, the bird itself is very flamboyant, and it's sort of the whole flauntingness, and that's kind of Balder down to a T, particularly in the second game, sort of, even though he doesn't necessarily flaunt himself until kind of the beginnings of the plot. He kind of flaunts his power, and he very much, like Bayonetta, likes to mock his opponents. So he likes to destroy them whilst looking good. And so he will comb his hair in the middle of a battle, which is quite frankly completely and utterly ridiculous, but it is somehow rather badass. And I'm pretty sure that something like The Bizarre Adventures of JoJo? I feel really bad because obviously there are people who love that series and I've just completely mangled its name. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, that's it. I got the constituent parts correctly, I just didn't get the order right. So I'm pretty sure that characters in that series have probably combed their hair in the middle of fights as well. It's a Japanese style thing, I think. Also something very much involved in, like, Greece. Because, you know, Grease the musical, not Grease the country. I would be very, very, very concerned about people kind of combing their hair, like slicking it back and combing it in the middle of a fight in Greece. That doesn't quite fit their personalities, I feel. Like, it'd just be very, very, very odd. Whereas, like, 60s America... oh, I think it's 60s. Yes, with the whole kind of... the whole slicked back hair and... that whole style. Never thought I'd end up bringing up Grease in Bayonetta. That's an odd combination. Though maybe perhaps not as odd as it potentially could be. Because the whole kind of ending song of Grease, like the "We go together like shamalama-lama-lama, lady-ding-ding-dong, best friends forever like shoo-up-shoo-wada-wada, hibbity-bum-de-bum, chang-chang-chang-chang-chang-bum. That's the way it should be, oh yeah." Just the whole idea of kind of friendship and we work together. It's just all kind of... it's all good fun. And sort of working with friends is great. Which is why it's really awesome that kind of the whole friendship of Jeanne and Bayonetta kind of gets explored in this game, and quite how far Bayonetta is willing to go to rescue Jeanne. Like, she really went to the depths of hell and back to save her friend. But one more verse and we will be nearly done with Tag Climax for good. Thank God. The frustrating thing is, it does just get really repetitive, as I've said, repeated times, which has probably gotten repetitive for you guys. When you're just playing the same verses again and again and again and again and again, it just gets a wee bit dull. I mean, part of the reason why I ended up sticking to these easier verses because I suck terribly as Boulder and Rodin, so I just thought, go for something that I can actually do, so I don't get my ass handed to me on a silver platter by the enemies. But there we go. One more part of Tag Climax to go. Let's do this.